Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. The issue of corruption in Zimbabwe has been exposed and discussed at length, particularly in the last few weeks since the documentary by Al Jazeera revealed the sheer extent of the problem. There is no doubt that Zimbabwe is being led by dunderheads. There is no doubt about that. The, docu- the, the document has revealed the level of incompetence and corruption in Zanu PF. But what maybe needs to be discussed here a bit further is the corruption and incompetence within the opposition, MDC slash Triple C. We can listen to this comment on corruption, an interview of Professor Jonathan Moyo, who is in exile. Just listen to this. There we have it. I think what is interesting about this documentary is not so much uh, about Professor Jonathan Moy, of course, trying to distance himself as not being corrupt, or at least putting the blame, most of the blame, on the ZANU PF Lacoste faction led by Emerson Mnangagwa that staged the coup and deposed Robert Mugabe. What I think should be, I wanted to focus on is the fact that the corruption and the looting of diamonds happened throughout. It started before the GNU of 2008 to 2018, and it continued through that period. In other words, the opposition MDC were aware of the looting that was taking place, the wholesale looting that was taking place in Jazeera and Marange. And They did nothing about it. So they cannot pretend that they are not corrupt because we all know that they are corrupt. And as for being incompetent, probably the most incriminating evidence for MDC slash Triple C is the fact that they failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform during the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so. This is the proof that not only Zanu PF is corrupt and incompetent, but the opposition too is corrupt and incompetent. So if we are serious about ending the madness of being governed by dunderheads, we have got to look at changing the political system so that we end uh, this present system that has delivered corrupt and incompetent leaders. The present election that is going ahead as we speak is not going to deliver any meaningful change. It's either going to deliver a Zanu PF government or a Triple C government or a combination of the two. Either result will mean we still have corrupt and incompetent leaders. That is the point. What we need is to overhaul our political system. One way to achieve that is to right now, not wait until tomorrow, right now, denounce this electoral system for being flawed and illegitimate. Because it is flawed and illegitimate. Zanu PF is rigging these elections, blatantly too. The regime has failed to produce a verified voters roll. It has denied 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora out there the right to vote. A clear case of cherry picking. The regime knows that most of those people in the diaspora are there as either political refugees, economic refugees, or both. And they blame Zanu PF for their plight, and they're therefore not likely going to vote for Zanu PF. And so Zanu PF decides they're not going to be given the vote. This is cherry picking. This process is so flawed and illegal that Mnangagwa himself is now contemplating denying all countries with a history of holding free, fair, and credible elections the right to observe Zimbabwe's elections under the pretext that those countries have never invited Zimbabwe to observe their own elections. And therefore then will be left with only those countries that have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And they'll be invited to observe Zimbabwe's elections in the hope that they will turn a blind eye to some of the blatant vote rigging and wanton violence and give Zanu PF a clean bill of health. So the process itself is flawed and illegal. We must denounce it now. Also, we've got to accept the opposition is participating in these elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed. They also know that by participating, they're actually giving the process credibility. But they are doing it out of greed. The same greed that stopped them implementing meaningful reforms during the GNU. So our argument is a flawed and illegal process and a discredited opposition participating in the flawed process cannot deliver at the end of the day a legitimate government with a people's democratic mandate. So Zanu PF must be denied political legitimacy at the end of this election process. Deny Zanu PF political legitimacy will open the door for us to have another government of national unity, as happened in 2008. The subtle difference now would be this GNU will not have Zanu PF or Triple C playing a major part, if any part at all, in that government of national unity. They failed to implement meaningful reforms uh, in 2008 to 2013. How can we trust them to implement meaningful reforms now? So we need fresh faces whom we can entrust the task of implementing the democratic reforms. The fact that the last GNU failed to implement even one meaningful reform does not mean we don't need the reforms. We do. If we are going to end this madness of a government led by dunderheads, we have to implement the reforms. The fact that the last GNU failed to implement the reforms does not mean they are very difficult to implement. On the contrary, they failed to implement even one meaningful token reform is because they lacked the political will. Zanu PF did not want to form itself out of power, and the opposition were easily bought off by Robert Mugabe. So we need this present electoral system to be condemned so that we open the door for a new government of national unity that will implement the democratic reforms. The essence of the democratic reforms is to create a political environment in which there can be a meaningful debate on issues and democratic competition for power. This will enable any political party that emerge out of after the system has been reformed to produce quality leaders. Zimbabwe at the present moment can be compared to a sewage pond. The water in there is so contaminated, it doesn't have any oxygen. All fishes died. All you get there are frogs and maybe catfish. Corrupt and incompetent leaders. We need to drain this sewage pond and then let it fill up again with clean water. Only then can we expect quality leaders to emerge out of that. That is the way forward. We can soldier on with the present system, but we are only wasting our time. After 43 years of corrupt and incompetent leaders, dunderheads, we have totally destroyed the country. Zimbabwe is in economic ruins right now because of 4 decades of gross mismanagement and rampant corruption. I think we should have the courage to say enough is enough and change the system. It is within our power to change it. And I hope we will be able to change it. Food for thought. Thank you very much, and Good night.